Now on the other side, this is the front side of this particular box, we've installed the door at the back. Now we need to put the frame and panel on the front, So again, very similar to our previous inserting the door, we use these pins. In this case, we're going to use 2 of them, one in that hole and the other there. And in exactly the same way that we secured the door, we're going to secure this panel. So put the base of the panel in first, and then click in to place the top. Right, so when it's done, that panel is in place, secure and ready. Now just one other comment on this is that should you at any time want to change the front panel to the back and the door to the front on your box, in other words reverse your door, it can be easily done by just pushing those spring hinges down, popping your panel and door out and changing it around. Okay, so now we'll put the lock into the door and show you how that assembles. The first thing to do is to take your key outside of the lock, put it somewhere that you're not going to lose it, and get the larger bolt and your lock mechanism, and we'll slide that inside the door so that it's secured. So you notice I've put in the lock into the door. There are 2 flat sides to the lock, so really you can only put it in 2 ways, upside down or up the right way. And quite frankly, it doesn't really matter. In this situation, I've left the label at the top and the key piece at the bottom. Now what we do is we take the larger nut and we'll just screw that on nice and tight to secure it to the door. Okay, so now that is done, we take our locking arm, which looks like this, with the bend in it on this side, so that as we put the arm on here, is a bit of clearance between the locking arm and the door frame itself. Next, we'll get the smaller nut and just tighten that on. Okay, so it should now look something like this. I just used the pliers to, after finger tightening the nuts, I use the pliers to give them a bit more tightness, so to speak, on the door and on the locking mechanism. And with that, we're pretty much ready to just test it. Right, so I've inserted the key, and it seems to work quite well. So we turn it that way and then that way, and our door is locked. And we need to not misplace these keys. Just as a tip, each key is pre-numbered, as you can see there. That's 880 or 088 maybe. So they can be replaced if they're lost. As you notice, it's got spring-loaded hinges on each side, so that makes it pretty easy to just slot it into one side and then spring that into the other hole on the opposite side. Okay, so here's our parcel flap, and that's done and ready. Now the frame is locked into place. Now, in this video we don't go into the installation of the box, this is just the assembly, but you will notice that there are 4 holes in the base. They're used for the anchor bolts to anchor your box onto a concrete platform, and this is the strongest way of making sure that your box stays where you want it and doesn't move. The other interesting thing that you might have noted already is that the package comes with a piece of foam. And that foam is not just packing for the box, it's actually a base for your parcel box. So the first thing it does is it covers up the anchor bolts, And the second thing is, as parcels drop down, they land on a relatively soft surface. Okay, so now I've just moved to my comfortable bench. What we're going to do now is take the internal parcel flap, that's this one with the 2 spring hinges on each side and a flat top, and we're going to connect that to the rods and then into the box itself. So the first piece is that we have a rod that has 1 hole in one end and 2 in the other. Now the flap is going to be connected via its hole here with a small screw, not the larger screw but the small screw, just connecting it into each end. So 1 rod on each end using the single hole. Okay, so I've just started the nut on each of the ends of the rods here. So they're not tightened up at all at the moment, and you might have wondered why I have a set of pliers. Well, that's really just to hold that nut while I get the drill and gently drill that, screw that up tight. So we'll do that on both sides. Okay, so that's done, and I like it nice and tight so it's not going to flop around, because that'll make it easy when you insert it into the box and connect it to the parcel flap. And so what we'll do now is we'll do that. We'll come over to our box and insert this into the framework at the back. And I will just get a light to show you where that is. So that's these notches that are at the back, and you can see they have holes in them, and that's where the spring latches will go into to put the internal flap. Okay, so that is now in place, and you'll see that I've just got the rods sticking out for me, and that'll make it easy for me to pick up when I put on the parcel flap itself. Okay, so now we have the parcel flap and in its guide here. So what we're going to do is connect up the guide to the flap. We flip it over, and you'll notice that there's these little notches on the sides of the steel here. Just be careful, they are sharp, so just be careful you don't cut yourself. What I do is I just take a pair of pliers and bring them out maybe 15 degrees, maybe 20 degrees, just a small slant, that when you slide on the grooves to the parcel guide, it's a little bit easier to get them in place. So try that, and once you've got your parcel guide in place, then you will be folding down the flap to secure it, and I'll go to that next. Okay, so we've now done that, but you'll notice that the flaps themselves are still sticking out a little bit, and what I do is I get the back end of a screwdriver nice and hard, rather than my thumb, and just simply use that to push it down tight and flat against the surface. Right. So then you'll see that the flaps are nice and tight. Oh, that one's not. I'm going to push it down a bit more, but mostly they're in tight. Our parcel guide is ready to go and to be connected to the box. Okay, so similar to the other hinges, you'll see holes at the bottom of our frame here, and a couple of spring hinges at the bottom of our parcel flap. So we will connect that now in place. Okay, so it's connected, and now what we're going to do is bring our rods out and connect those into the side holes on each of the flaps, and you'll see that I use the hole that's the second hole in, gives a better security for the internal flap to come up closer. So that's why the second hole exists. If you prefer, you can use the first hole. It's up to you. All right, let's connect that up, and I'll show you how that works. To connect that, we're going to use, by the way, the long screws and these little plastic washers. So each washer will go on a screw on the outside, like that. And then as we put it into the hole here, we'll put another washer in between that and the nut. Now you'll notice that I've put the washer so that the thread is facing outwards. That's very important, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, so that is just with the nut started on both sides. Now what we'll do is get our screwdriver and pliers and tighten that up. Okay, so now I have attached the nut on each side, tightened that up, and we're ready to fold the box and flap back into place. Now the way that this is done is that you take the flap and you gently just pull it in to the center so it goes around the back of the framework.